Given the size of the gap that the city is looking at right now in terms of the budget, but also you haven't got the details in terms of a bailout from other levels of government, how serious is the situation facing the city?
The situation facing the city is unbelievably serious. We are looking at a huge deficit at the end of the year in a government that never runs a deficit. So it's very serious, but we're also cognizant of the fact that the economic situation facing Calgarians is also very serious. And so for council to take the step today and say, we're going to freeze taxes despite the fact that we've got a huge deficit, it's actually a pretty bold thing to do, and it's the right thing to do because it actually says, we want to be part of this recovery with you citizens, and we are going to figure out a way to do that in a very thoughtful way. Remember, our taxes for residences are still the lowest in the country, and now we're saying let's freeze them, which is really the best probably that any city will be able to do in the country based on these deficits that we're seeing.
What does a zero represent? What does it mean for the budget?
Well, we have engaged a consultant to help because we have gone through what I call zero-based budgeting reviews for the last 10 years. We've almost gone through the entire city budget and found, as you know, about $750 million in savings and efficiencies, $750 million. But we've now hired a consultant to say, give us a fresh look and see if there are other areas where we could find some of these savings. And we've really engaged our own colleagues, our own staff at the city, saying now that we've gone through the zero-based, see if you can find more. So we're hopeful that we'll still be able to find some stuff in there that isn't going to really impact people in service levels. But as I've been saying for a couple of years now, most of the low-hanging fruit is picked. So this will mean that there will be service impacts to people in things like parks maintenance, roadway maintenance, transit, and maybe even fire and police.
So right now that gap is 218 million, but it could be less depending what the government gives. But,
That's right.
But people will be seeing service impacts basically.
People will definitely see service impacts. We will, as we always do, work to minimize those impacts. However, I will say that the announcement last week from the federal government that in their $19 billion restart package is operational support for municipalities facing deficits. We don't know how much that means to Calgary. We don't know how much it means to Alberta. If I do quick back of the envelope math, then that will make actually a significant difference in our one-time deficit problem. But still, to get to zero, we still have to look at either service cuts or concessions on labor. Really, those are the only two ways to move forward on that. Because the consumer price index has fallen a little bit under COVID, but there's still quite a bit of inflation out there.
At this point, how big of a concern is it for the entire picture to find out that your property tax revenues are down $580 million at the end of June?
I'm not sweating about it yet, because we did tell people that while the property taxes were due at the end of June, and I paid mine on June 30th, as I always do, we are hopeful that most of that will be returned by September 30th. After September 30th, penalties and interest will apply. So I'm not losing sleep over it now. I am a little bit concerned on the business side that there may be businesses that existed on June 30th that will no longer exist on September 30th, which is why our focus, if I bring everything back together, which is why our focus on masks and restarting the economy and keeping it started is so important.
That's a good link, sir.
Like it? It's called a segue.
Ready to segue or something.
So there's another motion coming forward on masks that's different from what's in today's agenda?
I understand that members of council really listened very hard to the presentation yesterday. They've been exceptionally moved by the really high numbers we've seen, and I want to be very clear. We doubled our rate of active cases in Calgary in 1 week. A 1 week exponential doubling is basically how fast it's ever been. It's how bad it was in the middle of April. And if that doubles again, and doubles again in the next 2 weeks, that means we'll have as many active cases as we did at the height of the lockdown. And so my colleagues on council have really said, you know what? We need to take bold action now if we want the schools to reopen, if we want kids to feel safe, if we don't want to close the economy again. We need to take bold action now. So my understanding is that a couple of my colleagues are going to test council's will with actually a full mask mandate, not just on transit, in most indoor public spaces starting on August 1st.
Is there enough support for that in what you've heard from your colleagues?
I believe so. I'll tell you, let me just tell you about me, which is, I certainly, although this is an administration recommendation that was before us to take a phased approach, look, it was my recommendation. It was what I supported. And even I, after hearing the presentation yesterday and after seeing the numbers over the last few days, as of this morning, I have been convinced that we ought to go further.
Can you just explain the legal framework, how far the city can go in mandating?
Yes, Section 7 of the Municipal Government Act. Remember, I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell you what I've been told. Section 7 of the Municipal Government Act gives us the right to make bylaws to protect the health and safety of our citizens by and large. And so the legal opinion we have is that Section 7 does allow us to mandate, by bylaw, to mandate the wearing of masks in indoor public spaces. Public spaces meaning places where the public can go. So that includes stores and shopping malls, but it doesn't include schools. It doesn't include private clubs, for example, but it does include a broader swath than just things owned by the city.
And in your perspective, how vital is this to be implemented full-blown by August 1st?
Look, the numbers are bad. And if you wait until the numbers are very bad before you take action, things will get worse. So right now, if you're doubling every week, there's actually nothing in place to prevent you from continuing to double every week. When we were doubling every week before, we had a full-on lockdown to prevent us from doubling every week. And so it may seem a bit much now, but you remember what I said in March. If at the end of this people say, hey, Mayor, you overreacted, that's actually a good outcome. It means people didn't die. And so what we want to do is we really want to put out the brush fire. We want to get that R rate, the transmission rate down. We want to ensure that the infected cases are not growing out of control before the kids go back to school. This is critical, and for that to happen, we've got to start very quickly.
And yesterday you had talked about exemptions for bars and restaurants. That's not the case with this, or what's the change?
Yeah, there's a few exemptions in there. We're exempting by and large bars and restaurants. Schools are outside of our world. We're exempting people with medical conditions. There's a few other things in there as well. The bylaw is basically written using best practices of these kinds of bylaws that we've seen in other places.
Are you imagining that enforcement will largely be just kind of reminding people to do it and not so much punitively?
I really like the way that someone said it yesterday at council, which was the officers will be armed with a package of masks, not a ticket book. And I think that's the critical thing, is to help. We have a 1.5 million masks that we've been given by the provincial government that we can start to distribute and to really help people be able to comply. Now, obviously, if you've got a medical condition, a bona fide medical condition that is preventing you from being able to wear the mask, that's okay. That's what you say. I'm not interested in giving people tickets and making them pay fines. I am interested in people keeping one another safe.
Back to me, you're talking about opening taps slowly for phase 1, 2, 3. Is like if you getting to a point where that might be back to the table or closing taps?
Well, wearing the mask is what prevents closing the tap. And that's really the critical thing. And you heard the Premier say it on the weekend, that if people don't wear masks, then he may well be left with no other options than to close the tap and re-close businesses. Nobody wants that. It's always on the table. Under the way that the Public Health Act works, it's always on the table, but let's avoid it.
All right. Can I just get a quick comment? Sorry, my camera's on.
How did you get over there?
Quick comment on Calgary's failed bid to be the CFL's Hub City.
Why are you ruining a perfectly nice day?
You happy you're talking about COVID numbers?
Right? What about this day was nice? Nothing. Well, the budget was nice. That was a nice outcome there. Yeah, I'm a huge CFL fan. And I know that there still is a lot of work to be done and a lot of negotiating to be done on whether we will have a CFL season in one place. Of course, after our hosting of the Grey Cup last year, I thought Calgary was the perfect spot. And it would have been great to have been able to be that host. But I'm also interested in seeing the Stampeders hoist the Grey Cup wherever it may be. Has it been announced where it's going to be? I've heard a rumor.
Winnipeg.
Yeah, so, clearly they will be good hosts. It's a beautiful football town. and they've had pretty low COVID rates, which is good for them. But you know, I'm just looking forward to seeing the Stamps play again.